Welcome, my family. Before we jump in, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. I would also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop your answers and any suggestions in the comments, and I might give you a shout out at the end of my next video. Thanks for being here and for all your amazing support. I was 10 the first time I learned how a building can stare back. Back then, my world was a few blocks of East LA and the path my cousin Leo and I took to McDonald's. Saturdays were for small freedoms. 2 crumpled dollars each, a short walk without an adult, the bright red and yellow sign at the end like a finish line you could taste. We were not supposed to take the street with the abandoned warehouse, but it ran straight and fast to the Golden Arches, and the other route curled around 3 extra corners and a barking dog that hated bikes and kids equally. Rules felt bendable when fries were waiting. The warehouse was a rectangle of sickness in the middle of everything bright. The chain-link fence leaned like it was tired of holding the place in. A faded sign for some long-dead company hung crooked above the loading dock, letters ghosted by sun and years. Half the windows had been bricked over. The rest were either boarded or too high to reach. People called it cursed. They said it swallowed light, that birds didn't land on it, that if you shouted near the loading ramp, your voice came back softer, as if the building had eaten part of your sound. Even adults gave it space. Bus drivers sped up by half a mile an hour when they rolled past it. Moms in minivans kept their eyes forward. The tire shop guy across the street sometimes stared at it like you look at old friends you fell out with, sad and mad at the same time. On that Saturday, summer had turned the sidewalk to stovetop heat. We walked the curb to avoid melted gum and kicked a plastic bottle cap back and forth, counting our taps like points. Leo was 12 and walked like he already owned a driver's license. He knew shortcuts and where the good shade lived. He also knew every McDonald's hack. Ask for a fresh drop of fries, mix Sprite with high C, fold the paper placemat into a tray liner so the ketchup didn't run. We crossed in front of the abandoned warehouse and pretended not to look. "Don't make eye contact," Leo said, as if the building had eyes and would follow you home if you stared too long. "Buildings don't have eyes," I said, because when you're 10 and scared, you hide it in facts. "Tell that to the faces in those broken windows," he said with a grin that was supposed to be brave and came off thin. We didn't stop. No one stopped. A busted pallet leaned against the fence like a tired dog. Pigeons pecked near the gutter, then flapped away all at once as if they'd heard something we couldn't. I felt the cooler air that always seemed to roll off the warehouse, a stale breath from a closed mouth. We cut across the small parking lot that McDonald's shared with the tire shop and the laundromat, hurried by the sun-faded bench, and pulled open the glass door into small heaven. Cold air, fryer hiss, and the sweet salty smell that makes your stomach purr before you say a word. It wasn't crowded. A mom negotiated with a toddler over nuggets versus fries. 3 teenagers in work boots laughed too loud in a corner booth. A guy in a Dodgers cap stared at nothing with a soft serve dripping into his napkin. Behind the counter, the night manager, thin with careful hair and a name tag that read Miguel, moved fast, smiling with only half his face like he'd used up most of his smiles hours ago. We ordered like pros. Leo, McDouble, no ketchup, add mayo. Large fries. Coke. Me. Happy Meal because I still liked the toy and I wasn't giving that up just because I was almost 11. Apple slices felt like a virtue in a box. I asked for a small fry on the side anyway. We took the corner booth by the big window because that's where you could see everything. The entrance, the counter, the parking lot, and across the street, the second floor row of warehouse windows blocked and boarded except for one rectangle halfway along that was only cracked, not fully covered. Leo liked to sit with his back to that window so he could watch the room. I liked to sit facing it because I wanted to prove to myself that buildings don't have eyes. We dumped salt on the fries and shook the box like dice. Leo poured ketchup into 2 perfect red moons on his paper mat and waved his hand over them like a magician. "You may dip," he said, and it felt like a small spell for safety. The sunlight on the warehouse wall made the cracks look like a map. Heat shimmered above the tar patch on the roof. Someone had tagged the loading dock with a looping name that started and ended with teeth. I told myself we were fine. We were inside, with Buzz and Ice and the gold-lit menu promising everything would taste like it always had. I ate 2 fries and a nugget and took a long, cold sip of my drink. Leo told me how he was going to build a ramp for his skateboard as Tia's driveway, and how it would not break her fence again because he had math now. His voice made space in my head where the warehouse couldn't live. I let the noise of the soda fountain and the soft squeak of sneakers take over. I felt safe. Then Leo stopped talking mid-sentence. He didn't choke or laugh. He just froze with a fry halfway to his mouth and stared past me, through the glass. I turned. At first, I thought I was seeing a trick of light, a reflection of the McDonald's interior laid soft over the warehouse window. But the angle was wrong. The afternoon sun was behind us. What lived in that cracked rectangle across the street did not come from our room. 2 shapes stood inside the warehouse, framed by that one window that had refused brick and board. They were not the size of normal men. They were bulked wrong, shoulders humped like something heavy had been draped over them and then fused to their backs. Their skin, if that word even fits, looked like walls after a flood, cracked and lifting in small, curling plates. And where faces should have been, there was something that made my stomach lower itself inside me. 2 inhuman figures with bulky bodies, cracked skin, glowing red eyes, and jagged mouths. The eyes were not lanterns, not reflected taillights, not anything I could explain with cars or kids play with flashlights. They were set deep and alive. They watched us. Not the room, not the door. Us. My hand found Leo's under the table, and our fingers locked on instinct, his grip tight enough to hurt. One of the figures leaned forward slightly, and when it did, small flecks of that cracked outer layer flaked away, drifting like gray snow inside the shadow of the window. The mouth moved. It didn't open the way mouths open. It pulled, edges sawing upward and outward, teeth not in rows, but set like broken fence posts at bad angles. "We should tell Miguel," Leo whispered so quietly I wouldn't have heard if I hadn't been sitting that close to his breath. "Don't look away," I whispered back, with the certainty only a terrified kid can have, as if looking away would break some thin spell keeping us safe. But you can't stare forever. Your eyes water. You blink. I did once, twice. When my vision cleared, the figures were closer to the window. Not pressed to it, not touching it, but nearer, like the room inside had breathed and set them 2 steps forward. The light in their eyes felt hotter. The sounds of McDonald's retreated and came back again like waves. The ice machine clunked. The fryer hissed. The register beeped. A toddler dropped a nugget and wailed like the world had ended. Somewhere in the middle of it, a distinct, wrong sound cut through. 3 knuckles tapping gently on slow glass. My head snapped right to our window, even though I knew the tapping hadn't come from here. The glass beside me showed only my fear-wide eyes and Leo's mouth pulled thin. The tapping came again. It wasn't from the McDonald's glass. It was from across the street, from the warehouse window, faint but definite, traveling the distance like a message. Tap, tap, tap. The red eyes blinked, not together like normal blinkers, but in a soft, alternating ripple that made my skin feel too small. The jagged mouths opened slightly more, a shift like a crust breaking. I saw something darker in those mouths that wasn't shadow. Leo stood up so fast his knee hit the table. The soda cup tipped and sloshed. I grabbed it on reflex and pinched the plastic lid down, ketchup moons smearing under my wrist. We didn't run. We couldn't. Our bodies had left us for a second. Miguel, Leo called, and the name came out too loud, too high. The manager looked up, already frowning because kids yelling usually means spills or fights. There's, Leo pointed. There's someone in there. Miguel followed his finger. His eyes hit the window, then the warehouse, then the window again. He didn't flinch the way we had. He looked like someone already tired who had been handed one more thing. He walked around the counter, leaned down to our level, and said, "I'm going to step outside for 1 second. Do not move." He stepped out into the heat. The door side shut. He shaded his eyes with one hand and stared at the warehouse window for a long moment. The way you stare at a Magic Eye poster waiting for the hidden picture to pop. He turned his head and looked at the tire shop. The guy there, Mr. Ortega, had seen Miguel and was already shaking his head slowly, his mouth pressed flat. Miguel looked back to the window. The shapes did not move. From inside, through double glass and all that bright afternoon, they still looked close enough to reach through our ribs. Miguel came back in. He didn't smile this time. "Come sit over here," he said gently, nodding to a booth farther from the glass. We didn't argue. He glanced at the window again as we slid across the vinyl, and in that half second, I saw his face naked of manager mask. He had seen something. He wasn't going to say it. "We get people messing around across the street. Sometimes," he said in that steady voice adults use when a room of kids has gone weird. "Teens. You know." He set a fresh tray of fries and 2 apple pies on our table, like a magician producing a dove. "On the house." Leo didn't touch them. "They weren't teens," he said. Miguel didn't argue. "Eat," he said softly. "I'll watch the door." We ate because our bodies wanted salt and sugar no matter what our heads were doing. My hands felt far away. I could taste nothing and everything at once. Every few seconds I glanced at the window, and every time my eyes slid that way, the shapes were still there, still watching, still anchored in that long rectangle with their eyes, making small burning points in a day that shouldn't have allowed burning points. The mom with the toddler noticed that we were staring and followed our line of sight. I saw her pupils shrink. She pulled her kid closer without thinking about it and whispered something that made the child pat her face and say, "It's okay, mama," the way kids do when they feel their parents' fear and try to hold it like a toy they can fix. After a while, seconds, minutes, I don't know, the red points dimmed a little. The cracked outer layers on their bulky bodies shifted as if a dry wind had found them inside. The jagged mouths closed a fraction. The tapping, which I had half convinced myself I'd imagined, came one last time, lower, like it had traveled farther. Then both figures turned their heads in the exact same motion, as if a string had been pulled, and faced deeper into the warehouse. They didn't step back. They didn't fade. They just weren't at the window anymore. The space held their shape for a blink, memory like a heat print. Then it was only cracked glass and the dark behind it. The room exhaled all at once. The toddler laughed for no reason. Leo's shoulders dropped. I only noticed in that moment how hard I had been clenching my teeth. Miguel came back to our table with a rag he didn't need and wiped a clean spot in small circles. "You're good," he said, mostly to fill the air with words. "What is that place?" I asked. "A warehouse," he said. And when Leo looked at him like duh, he added quietly, "It hasn't been just a warehouse for a long time." Mr. Ortega from the tire shop came in then, wiping his hands on a towel. He nodded to us like men nod to other men when something worse than weather has passed. He leaned on the counter and spoke to Miguel in a low voice. Words slipped out like nails falling from a bag. Again, kids, years, brothers. Miguel listened and shook his head once, a movement so small you could miss it if you weren't looking. Leo and I took the long way home. We didn't tell our mothers exactly what we'd seen because we wanted to be allowed to walk to McDonald's again, and we knew 2 monsters watched us from a broken window would buy us a month of rides and lectures and no freedom. We said there had been people in the warehouse. We said Miguel gave us pies for free because the fryer dropped extras. We said we had taken the other route back because of the heat. That night my dreams were full of red. Not the cartoon red of ketchup and arches. A darker red, pulsing like the inside of closed eyes when you press them hard. I woke twice to the echo of that tapping. I held a pillow over my face just to feel weight and not light. In the morning, I told Leo in the parking lot before church. He said he had dreamt nothing at all, which didn't mean he'd slept well. It meant his brain had shut a door. We avoided the abandoned warehouse street after that, except when curiosity or hunger or both were stronger than fear. We never once looked at that window on purpose, and we could never once stop ourselves from glancing at it anyway. Sometimes all we saw was dust. Once we saw a bird trapped inside, beating itself against the glass until it dropped out of sight. Another time we saw nothing at all, but felt watched anyway, which is a feeling you can't point to and also can't shake. By middle school, the warehouse had become background again, the way noises get folded into city hum. New kids learn the rule: don't touch the fence, don't shout, don't linger. Boys dared each other to toss rocks and then ran like the ground was hot. Girls walked in pairs without saying why. The building waited the way bad weather waits. We left East LA when I was 14. My mom got a better job across town and decided a new bus route meant a new zip code. Leo stayed. Our Saturdays became texts and photos. We still met at that McDonald's sometimes when I came back to visit, sitting at different tables now, because we like to see the room from new angles. We never sat by that big window again, and we never said that this was because of the warehouse. We pretended it was just because the booth near the soda machine had better access to refills. Years passed in normal ways. Bikes traded for beaters. Homework traded for night shifts. The world got bigger in ways that made some old fears shrink and others grow interesting. You're supposed to let childhood ghosts get smaller. You tell yourself that minds make monsters when they need them, and that the city fills in the rest with rumors. You call that day in the McDonald's a story, not a memory. Then one winter day, in my early 20s, I came back for a week to help my aunt after she hurt her knee. Leo met me for lunch. We hugged in the parking lot like we were older than we were. The warehouse still stood, tireless as a bad habit. The same cracked window, stare back. I didn't want to look. I looked. We ordered like always. Leo still without ketchup, me with a side I didn't need, and chose the booth near the soda machine again. The bright lights felt kinder in the early dark of winter. The air outside had the thin sting that makes breath look like speech. We sat and ate and talked about jobs and the bad economy, and how our old school had a new principal who didn't know the right way to say our street names. Then Mr. Ortega shuffled in from the tire shop, aided by Kane now, his hair thinner, his eyes still sharp. He saw us and smiled a little. "The McDonald's boys," he said, and then he leaned on the back of the booth and said the thing that made my hands go cold even though they were wrapped around a warm fry. "You still sit facing away from that window," he said. It wasn't a question. Leo and I turned as if choreographed, slow. The cracked rectangle across the street was only glass and shadow. No glow, no shapes, just a square the color of old air. We didn't, Leo started, and then didn't finish because it's hard to pretend ignorance in front of someone who watched you grow. Mr. Ortega sighed. "You were kids the first time they looked at you," he said softly. "I remember. Miguel called me after you left that day, and I said, again, I said, because the only thing bigger than a fear is learning it belongs to a group." He nodded. "People have been seeing them for years," he said, eyes flicking across the glass as if expecting a demonstration. "Not every day, not for everyone. Sometimes months go by and nothing. Then a kid looks up from a window seat and can't chew. Then the tapping. Always the tapping. 'Who are they?' Leo asked, voice low. Mr. Ortega let out air the way people do when they try not to let tears ride along with it. Two immigrant brothers, he said. They worked in that building when it was a wholesale place for discount goods. A man brought them on with promises. Long hours, little pay, locked doors at night. He took their papers, too. Told them they owed him for everything. Food, a mattress on the floor, the air they breathe. He shook his head once, as if the motion could loosen the stuck part of history. They tried to leave. He threatened to call IC. They sent what little they had back home. They got thinner, then quieter. One night, they climbed the stairs to that second floor. Some say they went to find a window and shout for help. Some say they went to make the pain stop. I wasn't there. Nobody who tells it now was there. But everyone agrees on the ending. The brothers hanged themselves. The man who exploited them called it an unfortunate incident and moved his operation 2 blocks over under a different name. The building sat empty after because the only things that moved inside it were those two. People have been seeing their spirits ever since. He said it plain, like you say weather, and that made it heavier. Leo swallowed. How long ago? Long enough for the person who first told me to be dead now, Mr. Ortega said. Not long enough for the neighborhood to let it go. He tapped his cane twice on the tile. Tap, tap. And my skin remembered sound before my ears did. You can say you don't believe in anything, but that place takes your breath a little when you pass. And you can call that anything you want and you will still slow your step. Have you seen them? I asked. He looked at the window and smiled a sad, crooked smile. Once, after my wife died, I was too tired to fear much. I sat where you used to sit because habit is strong. I looked up without thinking and saw them look back without blinking. I said my wife's name out loud, not because I thought it would do anything, but because I wanted a good thing to be in the air between them and me. They tilted their heads at the same time, like birds hearing a far sound, and then they were gone. I took my coffee black after that. Miguel, grayer now, brought us 2 apple pies without asking. He set them down and squeezed Mr. Ortega's shoulder. They still asked for ketchup with no burger. He said to Leo, try to drift us back to lighter water. Leo smiled. Always. Miguel looked at me. You still want the toy? He said it like a challenge and a kindness intertwined. I grinned and shook my head no, and we both knew the answer had only partly changed. Is there anything to do? I asked because the grown part of me thought there should be forms to fill and things to fix, and the younger part of me just wanted to put something between those eyes and any kid who might look up while chewing. Miguel shrugged with his whole face. We tell kids not to stop near that fence, he said. We keep the corner booth clean because it fills up first and you want eyes on the inside of the glass. The church down the block did a blessing once. Maybe it helped. Maybe it made the people doing the blessing feel like they were standing in the right place. Mr. Ortega tapped his cane on the floor once, soft. We say their names when we remember them, he said. Saying a name is a way of paying what was owed and never paid. He looked at the window again. I don't know their names, he admitted. No one ever kept them. The man who exploited them kept only numbers. We ate the pies. They tasted like cinnamon and heat and something that made my throat sting. We talked about small things after that because you cannot hold a story like that in the front of your mind and also remember to breathe. When we stood to leave, I found myself doing something I hadn't planned. I bought 2 apple pies and carried them outside. Leo followed without asking why. We walked to the edge of the lot closest to the warehouse, where the curb dipped and a weed had found dirt in the crack. I set the pies on the low wall there. It wasn't much. It wasn't anything, maybe. It felt like placing a stone on a marker you couldn't reach. For the brothers, I said under my breath. For someone's sons. Leo nodded. For 2 men who should have been paid. We stood a minute and let the winter air write itself into our lungs. Cars passed. A bus sighed. Somewhere a radio played a love song too loud through bad speakers and softened the block in a human way. We turned back, toward the McDonald's door. Before we stepped in, I looked up at the window one more time, because you always do. The glass was the same, cracked, brown with age, wrong in the afternoon. There were no red points. There was no movement, but the shadow just behind the glass felt heavy, like a room holding its breath. I didn't feel chosen the way I had at 10. I felt seen the way you feel seen when you say a name right. Noted, counted, placed. We left. We took the long way around the block, not because of fear, but because we wanted to walk in the air a little longer. The warehouse was behind us. The arches glowed in front of us. The day was the same shape as any other day. That night at my aunt's, while I folded towels and pretended the dryer's thump was regular and not an echo of tapping, I looked up the word exploit on my phone even though I knew what it meant. It felt important to put in letters in my head, to make use of and derive benefit from a resource, to use a person or situation unfairly for one's own advantage. I thought about the brothers and about all the times we had used the word cursed like it explained everything, when maybe the curse was the thing done to them, not the place they left behind. I didn't dream of red that night. I dreamed of men on a stairwell in a hot building, of hands holding a small paper bag with 2 pies, of the sound of a cane tapping in a clean, lit room where people ate and worked and breathed. The next time I went back to East LA, months later, someone had painted a mural on the cinder block wall across from the warehouse. 2 faces, not portraits, not realistic, but strong lines that looked like brothers, looked out over the lot. Between them, in neat block letters, someone had painted, "Pay what is owed." No more names lost. People had tucked small things under the letters, saint cards, a folded flag from a fast food kid's meal, a photo of 2 young men I didn't know, a candle. Miguel told me a neighborhood group had pushed the city to do something with the building. Permits take time. Money takes longer. Meanwhile, people still walked by with their heads forward and their steps quickened by a degree or 2 around the fence. Meanwhile, kids still sat at the corner booth because habit is strong and fries are fries. Meanwhile, the cracked window held its square like a stubborn eye. Sometimes I see them in my mind as we saw them that first time. 2 inhuman figures with bulky bodies, cracked skin, glowing red eyes, and jagged mouths. Sometimes I see them as men on a second-floor landing, thin and tired, fingers calloused, shoulders sloped, not because of monsters, but because of bills and fear and gravity. Both are true in the way stories are true, and also not enough. If you ask, I'll say I don't believe in ghosts the way movies want me to. But I believe in places that remember. I believe in rooms that hold and release light in ways that make your chest hurt. I believe in being watched by history through a broken window while you sit with a tray and a coupon and the idea that your city is bigger than 1 block and kinder than 1 man. I believe in the way people keep telling a story until it teaches them how to walk past a building without letting it swallow them. And I believe certain kinds of watching never stop. Across from that McDonald's in East LA, people have been seeing their spirits ever since. Sometimes eyes burn and sometimes they don't, but the window is always there and the light finds it. And if you are 10 and hungry or 22 and tired or 70 and carrying a cane and a memory, you will glance up and the past will meet your gaze. You will break a pie in half and set it down where a curb dips and a weed grows, and you will keep walking, not because it's nothing, but because this is where we live, and this is the route to food and work and laughter and the people we love. We still go to that McDonald's. We still take the long way when the air is hot and the birds fly higher than usual. And some days when the sun hits just right and the cracked square looks almost like a mirror, I swear I see 2 shadows that aren't our shift inside. I don't look away quickly anymore. I nod once, small, the way men nod to other men when something worse than weather has passed. Then I go inside and sit where the room is bright and the windows make the outside small, and I eat my fries with too much salt, and I watch the door for the kids who will sit where we sat and look up the way we did, and I make sure, without saying why, that the corner booth stays clean. When Maya was 10 years old, her family moved to Missouri. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small rental house her parents could afford. The neighborhood wasn't dangerous, but it wasn't the safest either. Still, her parents insisted it was only temporary, a stop before they found something better. The house itself looked ordinary from the outside. A simple, two-story place with pale siding and a basement that smelled faintly of mold. To Maya, it felt exciting at first. A new room, a new school, and the chance to explore. But within days, something about the house began to feel wrong. At night, Maya often heard noises she couldn't explain. The refrigerator humming louder than normal, faint thumps from the floorboards, even the sound of creaking stairs when everyone was supposed to be asleep. Her parents dismissed it as the house settling. But Maya wasn't convinced. One night, just a couple of weeks after moving in, she was sitting in her bed with the glow of her nightlight when she heard the unmistakable sound of a key turning in the front door. It was nearly midnight. Her parents were asleep upstairs. Her older sister, Emily, had finished her late shift at McDonald's hours earlier and was snoring softly in the room across the hall. Maya froze, holding her breath, listening. The lock clicked, the door eased open, and heavy footsteps crossed the creaky wooden floor. From her bedroom doorway, Maya peeked out just in time to see a man walk straight into their kitchen. He wasn't dressed like a burglar. He looked ordinary, disheveled, unwashed, with ragged clothes and an old backpack slung over one shoulder. His beard was overgrown, his eyes sunken. He looked like one of the homeless men she sometimes saw sitting near the McDonald's where her sister worked. Maya's heart thudded against her chest. She thought of waking her parents, but something made her stay still, watching. The man didn't rummage through their belongings. He didn't creep around like someone stealing. Instead, he walked straight to the refrigerator, opened it, and began eating. He grabbed leftovers, cold fries in a greasy McDonald's bag, and even a jug of milk he drank directly from. When he was done, he didn't leave. Instead, he opened the basement door and disappeared down the steps. Maya's skin prickled. She waited, listening to the heavy footsteps echo into the dark. Then silence. She wanted to scream, to run to her parents, but fear kept her frozen. What if he came back up? What if he heard her before she could reach their room? Instead, she quietly slipped to the basement door, her hands trembling, and twisted the lock. She shut him in. Moments later, she heard him returning, the slow, heavy thumps of his boots climbing back up. Then, the rattle of the doorknob. The man tried it once, then again, harder. The door shook under his weight as he shoved it, but the lock held. Maya bolted to her parents' bedroom, breathless, whispering, "There's a man in the basement. He has a key." At first, her father didn't believe her. But when the banging downstairs grew louder, he leapt from bed, grabbing the baseball bat he kept under the mattress. Her mother, pale and shaking, grabbed Maya and pulled her close. The chaos unfolded quickly. Her father stormed downstairs, shouting, and unlocked the basement door before Maya could warn him. The man stumbled out, his face twisted in anger. Clutching a kitchen knife he must have grabbed earlier. He lunged. The fight was brutal. Her father swung the bat, her mother screamed, and the intruder slashed wildly. The scene became a blur of shouting, with striking flesh and the gleam of the knife. In the struggle, her father wrestled him to the ground, and her mother, in a moment of sheer desperation, grabbed the knife. She stabbed the man. The silence afterward was deafening. The intruder lay still on the floor, blood pooling across the worn linoleum. Police arrived within minutes of her father's frantic call. The questions began immediately. Who was he? How did he get inside? Did they know him? The horrifying answers unfolded as detectives searched the man's belongings. Inside his backpack, they found food wrappers, clothes that smelled like damp concrete, and a notebook filled with scribbled notes. But what froze Maya's blood was the folded piece of paper tucked neatly inside. Her sister Emily's McDonald's work schedule. Every shift, every break time, every closing hour, written in shaky handwriting. It was clear he had been watching Emily. But the worst discovery came next. When police inspected the basement, they found signs of long-term living. A blanket spread out, empty cans, and even a lantern. He hadn't just stumbled into their house that night. He had been living there for days, maybe weeks. How did he get in? Maya's father demanded. The detective held up the key they had taken from his pocket. It's an exact copy of your house key. Her parents exchanged horrified looks. They had never given out a spare. To this day, no one knows how the man got it. The rental company swore they hadn't made duplicates. The locks were standard, nothing high security, but the precision of the copy was chilling. It was as if someone had handed it to him, or he had been watching long enough to have one made. The man was eventually identified as a transient who had been drifting through Missouri in and out of shelters. But the details didn't matter much to Maya. What haunted her was the image of him, standing in their kitchen under the dim light, drinking from their milk jug as though he belonged there. She would never forget the sound of his footsteps, slow and deliberate, as he climbed up from the basement that night. And she would never forget the realization that sometimes the danger isn't outside your locked doors. It's already living inside your home. Ella was 17 when she started working at McDonald's. It was supposed to be temporary, just a part-time job after school, so she could save up for college applications and a beat-up car. The first week felt normal enough: register shifts, stocking straws, learning to ignore the constant smell of grease on her clothes. But after a while, things began happening that she couldn't explain. It started with the customer. He came in on a Tuesday, late in the evening, the kind of hour when the dining room is mostly empty and the fryer's hum fills every silence. Ella noticed him because he looked out of place, not like the regulars who shuffled in after work. His clothes were neat, his hair combed back, but his eyes were hollow, his movements sharp. He ordered only water. When Ella brought his cup, he stopped her with a quiet voice. "I need hot sauce." She handed him the small packets automatically, but instead of using them on food, he tore each one open and poured the contents into his cup of water. 1, then 2, then 10. His hands trembled and sweat shone on his forehead. "Sir," Ella began, "you can't." He didn't answer. He lifted the cup and drank all of it in one swallow. The red liquid ran down his chin, staining his shirt. Then he whispered, more to himself than to her, "This is how it feels. This is how he burned." Ella froze. "Excuse me." The man's hands shook harder. "My son, kitchen fire, flames in his mouth. This is fair." He stood, left the cup on the counter, and walked out into the night as if nothing had happened. When Ella cleaned up, she found a photo tucked under the cup. A boy, maybe 10, smiling in front of a birthday cake. The edges of the picture were burned, the plastic curling. She took it to her manager, but by the time the police were called, the man was long gone. That was the first sign something was wrong. The second came 2 weeks later. Ella was closing, mopping the lobby when the lights flickered. She thought nothing of it. Old wiring, too many machines running at once. But when the lights came back, 2 women were standing by the soda fountain. They weren't customers. Their clothes didn't fit the time. Heavy floor-length skirts, blouses buttoned to the neck, lace gloves. Victorian almost. They didn't move. They didn't order. They just watched. Ella set the mop down slowly. "Can I help you?" Neither answered. One of them smiled faintly, the kind of smile you see in antique portraits, sharp and cold. Then the power went out entirely, plunging the restaurant into pitch black. When the emergency lights kicked on, the women were gone. But on the counter by the register, someone had written in condensation on the glass screen, "Still unpaid." It became a pattern. Sometimes, Ella would see them in the corner of her eye. Two women in old-fashioned dresses slipping through the crew door into the kitchen. Other nights, she'd find messages scrawled in grease on the tiles. "Where is our money?" or "We will collect." Her co-workers started whispering about her, calling her the haunted one. They didn't see what she saw, but strange things kept happening when she was on shift. The fryers would shut down for no reason. The ice machine would spew water until the floor flooded. One co-worker, cleaning the freezer, swore he heard a woman's voice whispering his name, even though he was alone. One night, after closing, Ella stayed behind to check the security cameras. The system was old, the footage grainy, but she found what she was looking for. On the tape from 3 nights earlier, around midnight, the back door opened by itself. 2 women walked in. No keys, no alarms. They drifted across the lobby, their faces pale, blurred by static. They stopped in front of the sealed playroom door, locked for renovations, and walked through it. Ella paused the tape. Her hand shook. She zoomed in on one of the women's faces. The resolution was terrible, but even through the blur, she recognized the exact faint smile she had seen near the soda fountain. Ella brought the footage to her manager the next day. He looked at it for 10 seconds, then shut the screen off. "Don't show this to anyone else," he said. "Why not?" "Because it's not new. This place has always had issues. People have been talking about the sisters for years." "What sisters?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping. In 1912, there was a fire. The land this McDonald's is built on used to be a hotel. 2 sisters owned it. The insurance company refused to pay after the fire, called it negligence. They lost everything, died waiting for money that never came. Some people say they never left. That's why you see them in here, still waiting, still asking. Ella wanted to laugh, to call it superstition, but then she remembered the words on the counter, the condensation on the screen, the grease on the walls. Still unpaid. The last night she worked there, the activity escalated. It was late, and she was wiping down the tables. Only 2 other employees remained in the kitchen. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered again, and the entire room went cold. So cold she could see her breath. From the kitchen, she heard her co-worker scream. She ran back and found him pinned against the wall, his eyes wide. Behind him, the stainless steel surface of the freezer door was fogged over, words carved into the mist. "Give us what was promised." The 2 women stood nearby, their Victorian dresses brushing the greasy floor. Their eyes locked on Ella. One of them lifted her hand and pointed directly at her chest. Ella stumbled back, her breath shaking. "I don't have anything for you," she shouted. The sisters' mouths moved at the same time, whispering in unison, though no sound came out. The cold deepened, the lights buzzed, and the fryers hissed as though boiling over. Her manager burst in then, yelling, "Enough!" He grabbed the cross he wore under his shirt and held it up, his voice cracking as he shouted a prayer in Spanish. The sisters stopped, their eyes burning brighter for a moment. Then they flickered like an image on a broken screen and vanished. The freezer door slammed shut with a bang. Ella quit the next morning. She never went back for her last paycheck. Months later, she read an article about lawsuits against insurance companies from the early 1900s. One section mentioned 2 sisters, Abigail and Clara Whitaker, who lost their hotel in an East LA fire of 1912. Their insurance claim had been denied. The case went unresolved until their deaths. Ella closed the article, her hands clammy. The McDonald's was still open. People still ate fries under the same buzzing lights. But every so often, On the local Facebook groups, someone would post about the women in old dresses who showed up late at night near the soda fountain. And always, the comments ended the same way. They're still waiting for what they were owed. I was 17 the night I learned how long a minute can feel. Rehearsal had run late. The theater's back doors breathed out warm dust and the smell of paint as we came out, still half in costume. Noah with eyeliner smudged under his eyes, me with glitter clinging to my hoodie from the fake starlight we'd rigged over the set. We wanted food that didn't come from a vending machine. The only place open, bright, and close enough to walk was the McDonald's tucked next to the strip mall. We went there all the time after rehearsal. It was routine, salt, soda, and fluorescent lights that made your eyelids heavy while you laughed at nothing. There's a kind of safety in a place like that. Families, students, night workers, everyone leaning on the same idea that a lit room and a uniform behind a counter equal normal life. We pushed through the door and were hit with the hiss from the fryers and the sweet tang of ketchup and syrup. There were only a few people inside. A couple sharing a milkshake without speaking, a man in a work vest staring into his phone, and the night manager wiping down a tray with that blank, practiced look of someone counting minutes to closing. Music murmured under the hum of the lights. Noah ordered first. He always knew. Quarter pounder, no onions. Large fries. Coke. I got a 10-piece nugget and a small fry because I thought I wasn't that hungry, then grab an extra barbecue sauce anyway. We picked the corner booth, our usual, halfway between the window and the soda station. From there you could see everything. The counter, parking lot, doors, and most of the dining room. The glass beside us was a black mirror with a glare of golden arches floating on it like a crown. We started talking about rehearsal, the way the new lighting cue made Act 2 feel like a different play, how the director had said we needed to find the truth of the scene, which was code for remember your lines. Noah had been intense all week, trying to nail the timing on a monologue, spinning his straw in his cup whenever he got quiet. But he was relaxed now, kicking my sneaker under the table to make me stop tapping, telling a story about our math teacher accidentally sending a meme to the whole class group. Then Noah's eyes lifted in the middle of laughing, and the joke fell apart between us. He stopped moving, straw still in his hand. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking through the window. I followed his gaze. At first, I thought I was seeing our reflections, two long shapes in the glass, then something darker sliding behind them. But the reflection didn't move when we did. Outside, right up against the glass, a man stood with his head angled slightly down, eyes lifted so he could look in without the overhead lights reflecting back at him. He was close enough that if the window opened, his breath would have touched the table. He had a bike beside him. One hand rested on the handlebar as if he might ride off at any second, but his body said the opposite, planted still, studying. He wasn't dressed for winter or summer, just layers that blurred shape, dark hoodie, darker jacket. And on his hip, half swallowed by the jacket hem, but unmistakable, was a holster. Long hard-edged, a machete handle stuck up from it like a second spine. You can talk yourself out of fear by naming things. Tool, sheathed, legal. Maybe he's riding home from a landscaping job. Maybe he's weird about windows. Maybe he's looking for his reflection. Maybe he's waiting for someone. Maybe, but he wasn't looking for his reflection. He wasn't waiting for someone. He was looking inside, and he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Noah. I felt the soda swallowed down wrong in my throat. Noah didn't blink. We both went very still in that way animals do when they sense a shape in the trees. The man's head tilted again. It was the kind of tilt you make when you're trying to line something up in your mind, to memorize it. Do you know him? I whispered, and my voice sounded like I'd been running even though I hadn't moved. Noah shook his head once. We didn't move for several seconds. The man didn't move either. Then he took one step to the right, slow and smooth, eyes keeping level with the window, tracking. He walked along the glass, pushing his bike, not looking away. He traced the building's edge like he was drawing it, then disappeared around the corner. The grease smell returned. The music came back into focus, and the night manager's voice floated over with a soft, "You guys okay?" I nodded too fast. Yeah. The couple with the milkshake was already gathering their trash. The man with the phone didn't look up. The door was a rectangle of light and exit, bright and obvious. It also felt about a mile away. Noah swallowed. He had a machete, he said, like he was reminding me of something I might have missed. I saw. The man reappeared on the next window, the one near the front doors. He put his forehead close to the glass to shade the reflection with his hoodie, then peered in. Not scanning the room, not cautious, focused. He looked left to right, found Noah again and stopped. He didn't tap. He didn't smile. He didn't even narrow his eyes. He just locked on, alert and clean and clinical. Noah set his cup down very carefully. His hand was shaking so slightly that the ice clinked like a tiny bell. "I don't want to walk to the car," he said, then laughed without humor because we hadn't driven. We had walked from the theater. "I don't want to walk anywhere. We're not going anywhere." My mouth was dry. "We're calling." I pulled my phone out and held it low under the edge of the table so it wouldn't be obvious, like secrecy could make us safer. The screen lit my fingers. I pressed 911. The ring felt too long. 911, what is your emergency? I had never called before. I didn't know if you were supposed to be calm. I tried anyway. "Hi, we're at the McDonald's on..." I gave the cross streets, automatically reading the address off the receipt in my mind because the brain grabs whatever anchor it can find. There's a man outside with a machete in a holster. He's been circling the building and looking in the windows. He's watching my friend. "Is he inside the restaurant?" the operator asked. "No." "Has he threatened you, attempted to enter, or displayed the weapon in a threatening manner?" I looked. The man had drifted to the side door. He tested the handle gently, like he was checking a pocket. Locked. He didn't pull. He just seemed to note the fact. "No, not like. He hasn't tried to break in. He just keeps walking around and staring." "Is the weapon visible?" "Yes. It's in a sheath. On his belt. It's long." I didn't say machete again, as if the word might escalate the situation by itself. "He also has a bike." "Okay, stay inside. Do not approach him. Officers are en route." "Can you describe him?" I did. "Height, clothes, bike, the way he moved." "He keeps looking at my friend," I added, and my voice went tight around the edges. "Just him. He follows him through the windows." "You said you're inside and the doors are locked." I looked to the counter. The night manager had been watching us now, his eyebrows lifted, a question in his posture. I pointed at the door. "Can you lock it?" He nodded, came around the counter, and slid the bolt with a firm, final sound that made the air in my lungs return for half a second. He flipped the sign to closed even though it wasn't closing time yet. The manager gave us a small, sober nod that said, "We're taking this seriously." "Doors are locked," I told the operator. "There are few customers. Not many." "Okay, stay where staff is visible. Officers will meet you inside. Do not confront him. If he leaves, do not follow. Can you safely take a photo for identification purposes?" I'd already been lifting my phone, inch by inch like lifting a weight. The camera app came up. The man had moved again, tracing back to the window closest to us. He was nearer now, the glass separating our air from his. The phone's lens picked up the glare and the arcs and the bright red of ketchup packets on our table. It also picked up his face. I took the photo. The shutter sound, even muted, felt loud. He didn't flinch. He just kept looking at Noah. Not blinking, not straining. As if he were waiting for something. As if Noah was the thing he had come for and the rest of us were just part of the glass. "Got it," I said into the phone. "Good. Stay on the line with me." the dispatcher said, calm sewn into her voice like thread. Officers are nearby. The couple with the milkshake came to the door with their tray out of habit, saw the closed sign, and hesitated. The manager waved them back gently and said, sorry, folks, small issue. They turned and sat again, eyes following the manager's eyes, then landing on the man outside. The woman stiffened. The man's hand drifted to his pocket for keys he didn't need right then. Noah breathed in, breathed out, once, twice. I could hear the seconds in the soda machines, gentle purr, and the clock above the menu screens. I could hear the headsets crackle as someone in the back asked, we good? And the manager said low, just stay back a minute. The man stepped sideways again, slow, the way hunters move, not because they must but because they choose to. He angled toward the window by the play place, peered in, then moved to the drive-through lane and looked through that glass too, like he was checking the full perimeter. He pushed the bike with one hand and rested the other near the machete handle, not grasping it, just close as spatial claim. The weirdest thing was how normal he made it look, like circling a building with a blade on your belt and staring at a stranger was a normal errand he'd added to a list between picking up milk and airing out his tires. Officers are pulling into the lot, the dispatcher said in my ear. Do not approach the exits. Blue and red flicker entered the glass near the far corner. Relief hit me so hard it was almost dizziness. The man didn't run. He didn't even hurry. He turned his head, clocked the cruiser's shape without shifting his shoulders, then leaned over his bike and adjusted something on the handlebar like the lights were a street light he'd been waiting on. When the car slowed beside him, he pushed the bike, easy and unbothered, toward the far edge of the lot. The officer in the passenger seat gestured. The man paused. They spoke. Couldn't hear through the glass, only saw the officer's palm lifted in a hang-on shape, and the man's head tilt that I'd already learned meant he was looking without really changing anything inside. He pointed vaguely down the street as if answering a question. The officer pointed to the machete. The man's hand touched the sheath, not defensive, more explanatory. He displayed it without unsheathing. He was saying, it's covered. It's mine. I haven't used it. He didn't ride off then. He waited while the officers said something into the radio. He let them look at the bike. He kept his face dull and unmemorable, as if he'd done this before and knew the choreography. The part that made me feel cold again was how often, even while he was being spoken to, his eyes drifted back to the window where Noah sat. The words outside had to be about the blade and the law. The attention was about the boy on the other side. Stay inside until officers signal, the dispatcher said. They will come speak with you. The officers did not draw their weapons. They did not cuff him. They did not raise their voices. After a few minutes that stretched out like they were stitched from rubber bands, the man eased onto the bike seat. He didn't look back at the officers. He didn't look at us. He rolled forward with a slow, steady pedal and drifted off the lot into the dim side street, the red and blue lights painting the back of his jacket for 2 seconds before swallowing it at night. The cruiser parked and one officer came to the door. The manager unlocked it. The officer stepped in, already scanning faces the way cops do, counting, categorizing. He was breathing normally, but there was a tighter set to his jaw than the rest of his body admitted. You two called? He asked, eyes landing on us because terror is a uniform too. Yes, I said. My voice came out thin. He was watching. He kept circling. He had. I gestured uselessly toward my own hip. We saw, the officer said. He didn't sit. He kept his body between us and the glass like instinct. You're okay now. Is he? Noah started, then stopped, the question obvious and heavy. Is he coming back? The officer glanced toward the dark where the man had gone. We spoke with him. He has not made any threats. He didn't brandish the weapon. It was sheathed. He hasn't attempted to enter the premises or harass anyone verbally. As of this moment, He hasn't committed a crime we can arrest him for." The words should have been comforting. They landed like ice. "He was watching him," I said. "Not everyone. Him." I didn't mean to make it sound like an accusation at the officer, but it came out hot because fear, when it can't act, starts to boil. "I understand," the officer said, calm because he had to be. He took out a small notebook. "We're going to make a field report. Can you describe what you saw in detail? We have your call logged, but I'd like your narrative too. And you mentioned a photo." I showed him. He leaned in without touching the phone. Even in the glare blur, the image was clear enough to show the man's eyes and the line of the sheath. The officer's mouth tightened a fraction. He nodded and asked to airdrop it to a department phone. I sent it. "What happens now?" Noah asked. He wasn't shaking anymore. He was too still, like a pawn that hasn't decided whether to freeze. "We'll file the report," the officer said. "We'll add the photo and our contact. We're going to patrol the area for a while tonight. If you see him again, call immediately. Do not engage. If he reappears and does anything that crosses a line, tries the door again, follows you, speaks to you in a threatening way, we can act. Right now, given the circumstances, there's not an arrestable offense." "He had a machete," I said, softer. It felt like an argument, even though I knew it wasn't. Like I was trying to convince the world to match the feeling in my body. "In this city," the officer said carefully, "carrying a sheathed blade isn't by itself illegal. Context matters. That doesn't mean you were wrong to call. You did the right thing. Can someone walk us?" Noah asked then, cutting the conversation like a blade of his own. We walked from the theater. "Of course," the officer said, already nodding toward his partner. "We'll follow you. Or you can wait here and call someone pick you up. Whatever you're most comfortable with." The manager spoke up. "You can wait here as long as you need," he said, tone gentle now that the immediate wave had passed. He looked older than he had a half hour ago. We called our director. He arrived in a flurry of keys and concern and the smell of sawdust from the set shop. He didn't ask questions in front of the officers. He hugged us both in one of those quick, tight ways that mean I'm here, then drove behind the cruiser while they shadowed us all the way to Noah's street, then to mine. The officers waited until the porch lights took us in and waved once, a small gesture that felt like a drawbridge lifting back up. The house was quiet. My parents' voices were careful and loud at the same time, like they thought volume might anchor me. I went through the motions, shower, warm clothes, brush teeth, because the body needs tasks to feel normal when the mind is sliding sideways. Sleep did not come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the tilt of the man's head, the wrongness of stillness, the precise way his eyes moved without his body following. I heard the soft clink of ice in Noah's cup, the click of the door bolts sliding into place, the distant whir of a bike tire crawling away. In the morning, the world was the same. That felt rude. Sunlight fell on the kitchen table. My phone held the photo like nothing had happened except pixels. School buzzed with quizzes and complaints about cafeteria pizza. Noah and I passed in the hallway and didn't really speak because how do you say, "I know what your face looks like in the reflection of a window," while someone chooses you with their eyes? That afternoon at rehearsal, our director addressed it briefly. "We take care of each other," he said, not sharing details, just making the room a little stronger. A few of the tech kids offered to walk us to rides from then on. It's a small thing, walking in pairs, but it felt like locking a door you didn't know you had. For a while, every fast food place looked like a set. I scanned windows, corners, bikes. McDonald's no longer meant fries. It meant glass and how glass becomes thin when someone outside wants you. Noah stopped sitting near windows at any restaurant. He would angle himself so his back was to a wall and his eyes could see exits and the soda machine. It made me sad at first. Then I realized it made him feel like he was steering the boat again, and I stopped minding where I sat. We heard back a few days later from the officer. He called to say they hadn't located the man again that night. They'd reviewed nearby cameras, grainy, late, a shape on a bike that could have been anyone. "We'll keep the report on file," he said. "Call if anything else happens." I thanked him because it's what you say, not because it felt like anything was fixed. Weeks passed. The photo stayed in a folder in my phone, titled with the case number. A string of numbers and letters that looked official and powerless. I didn't look at it, but I didn't delete it either. The presence of it arranged my actions in small ways. I'd choose the booth away from the glass, the parking spot under the lamp, the route home with more houses. I'd check the reflection of the glass every time out of habit, not fear, the way your tongue checks a chipped tooth over and over, as if touching it could smooth the edge. One night, about a month later, we were at the same McDonald's again because habits are stubborn. It was earlier this time, daylight softening the parking lot. The place felt normal again in the way sometimes a room becomes itself after you've left it alone long enough. We sat away from the window without talking about it and ate in that comfortable silence friends earn. Kids ran wild in the play place. A worker laughed at something on his headset. A little boy dropped a fry and tried to pick it up without his mom seeing. When we finished, we gathered our trash. No, it was fine. I was fine. We were both already thinking about Act 2. We walked toward the door and I pulled it open and the afternoon air hit my face and it smelled like warm asphalt and cut grass and, just for a split second, the faintest breath of chain oil from a bike. I looked left. There were bikes out there, kids' bikes leaning against the play place fence, an old cruiser chained to a sign. None of them were moving. None of them were his. The lot was full of people who belonged there, and nobody was watching through the glass. Noah saw me look, and he looked too. Then he smiled a little, not at anything, just at the act of checking and finding nothing. We walked out together. The door side shut behind us. The daylight sliced the reflection into pieces and carried it away. Nothing happened. That was the point. Nothing is what you want. And nothing is what feels like a gift once you've learned how something can be. We never learned who he was. We never learned why Noah. The file stayed a file. The photo stayed a photo. The report stayed a report. If someone asked later, what did he do? The answer was the part that still made my stomach dip. He didn't. He watched. He circled. He stood close enough to fog the glass with his breath if he wanted to. He existed one thin barrier away, holding a thing that can cut, and did not do anything that drew a line the law could see. I understand laws better now than I did then. I understand how they're written to catch actions, not intentions. I also understand something else, something the law can't hold because it isn't concrete, and because it matters anyway. The way someone's gaze can wrap around you like a hand, the way silence can be used like a tool, the way presence can be a threat even when no words are said. I learned the length of a minute that night. I learned the sound of a door bolt sliding home and the weight of a phone that knows who to call. I learned that sometimes safety isn't a wall. It's a person sitting across from you who doesn't look away and a voice on the line telling you to stay where the staff can see you. I learned that sometimes the answer to what did he do is he didn't. And the answer to what did we do is we stayed together and we called. And I learned how, even when nothing happens, something can change you. Not just into someone who checks windows, but into someone who watches out for the people he loves with a quiet, steady attention that could be its own kind of light. Alina was 18 when she took her first job at McDonald's. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough for gas money and college savings. The restaurant itself had a strange reputation. Older coworkers whispered about it when they thought no one was listening, that the building stood on cursed land. Alina brushed it off. Rumors. Every town had a haunted house or ghost story, but soon she learned why people spoke in hushed voices. It started during a night shift in July. The summer heat made the dining room feel thick, even with the air conditioning rattling. The rush had slowed, and Alina was wiping tables when she noticed two women walking in. Something about them felt off. They were dressed like they'd walked out of a black and white photograph. Long, dark Victorian-style dresses, lace gloves, their hair pinned in tight coils. The fabric looked heavy, suffocating for summer. Nobody else seemed to notice how strange they were. The women didn't order food. They didn't sit down. They drifted across the dining room with a slow, deliberate grace and stopped in front of the sealed-off party room. A room closed since Alina had been hired. Renovation plans kept getting delayed, her manager said. Without hesitation, the two women each placed a gloved hand on the locked handle. The door clicked, swung open, even though the key was supposed to be in the office safe. Alina blinked in shock. Before she could react, the women slipped inside and pulled the door shut behind them. She rushed over. The handle rattled uselessly in her hand. Locked, just as it always had been. The next morning, Alina checked the security footage. She expected nothing, just her own reflection or maybe a glitch. But the recording showed exactly what she'd seen. Two women in Victorian-era clothes walking calmly across the lobby. Their movements were smooth, eerie, like film played at the wrong speed. She zoomed in on their faces. Her breath caught. They weren't blurred like normal security footage. They were sharp, too sharp. She could see the faint curl of one woman's smile, the pale hollowness of the other's eyes. They looked alive, but wrong, like portraits that had stepped off a wall. When they disappeared into the locked party room on the tape, the camera glitched with static and cut out for 15 seconds. When the feed returned, the room was empty. Alina didn't know what to believe. She asked her manager casually, "Hey, what's up with that old party room?" He stiffened immediately. "What?" "Just wondering. I thought I saw someone go in." "Nobody can get in there," he said too quickly. His face tightened. "Don't bring it up again, okay? It's nothing you need to worry about." That was the moment Alina realized the rumors weren't just rumors. Something about this place was wrong, and management knew it. The sightings didn't stop. On another shift, Alina was cleaning trays when the overhead lights flickered. In the reflection on the glass doors, she saw the two sisters standing behind her. She spun around. Empty, but on the counter, written in a dripping smear of condensation, were the words, "We are still waiting." Another night, the drive-through headset crackled with static. Then a woman's voice whispered in her ear, "Abigail." "Clara." She tore the headset off and dropped it, heart pounding. She went home shaken and searched the history of the land online. That's when she found the truth. In 1912, the spot where McDonald's now stood had been home to a grand hotel, owned by two sisters, Abigail and Clara Whitmore. On a winter night, a fire tore through the building. Dozens of guests escaped, but the sisters didn't make it out. Or rather, they made it out but not alive. Their bodies were found together in the ashes, burned almost beyond recognition. The worst part? Their insurance claim had been denied. The company accused them of fraud, claiming they'd staged the fire for money. With no payout, their debts swallowed everything. They died ruined, cheated, and angry. Alina leaned back from the screen, goosebumps running across her arms. The sisters weren't just rumors. They were real. The final night Alina saw them began like any other closing shift. Midnight, the lights humming, fryers cooling down. She was sweeping near the play area when she heard the click of a door opening. Her stomach dropped. The sealed party room door was wide open. Light spilled from inside, even though no power ran to that section. Slowly, as if pulled by a string, Alina stepped closer. Inside, the air was cold. Dust coated the floor, and broken chairs leaned against the walls. But in the center stood Abigail and Clara, side by side, their dresses pristine, untouched by dust or age. They turned to her in unison. "Where is our money?" they asked together, their voices hollow, echoing like they came from the bottom of a well. Alina's throat tightened. I don't have anything. I don't know. You work here, one whispered. This land, this profit, this debt is ours. Their eyes glowed faintly, pale fire in the shadows. Their gloved hands reached out, fingers long and bony under the fabric. The air grew so cold Alina's breath fogged in front of her face. She stumbled back, tripping over the broom, but the sisters advanced. Their shoes didn't touch the ground. Pay us, Clara hissed. Or join us, Abigail finished. Alina turned and fled. She ran straight out of the restaurant, leaving the broom, the till drawer, everything. She didn't stop until she was in her car with the doors locked, shaking so badly she could barely get the keys into the ignition. When she looked back through the glass doors of the McDonald's, the party room stood dark and shut again, as if it had never opened. The next morning, she quit. She didn't bother collecting her last paycheck. But she couldn't stop thinking about the sisters. She looked up old photographs of the hotel, grainy pictures in the library archive. And there they were, Abigail and Clara, smiling stiffly at the opening day ceremony in 1908. The same dresses, the same faces, the exact women she'd seen walk across the McDonald's lobby. The McDonald's is still open today. Families eat their happy meals. Teenagers laugh in the booths. Workers wipe counters without knowing. But sometimes, just sometimes, when the lights flicker near closing, customers report seeing two women in Victorian dresses glide silently through the lobby. They never order. They never eat. They only walk to the party room door, unlock it without a key, and disappear inside. And on the nights they appear, employees whisper that the ice machine floods, the registers crash, and the fryer flames flare just a little too high. As if the building remembers what it once was. As if Abigail and Clara are still trying to collect what was promised to them. Insurance money, debts repaid, justice. And until they get it, they'll keep returning, drifting silently through the golden arches glow, searching for payment in a place that was never meant to be theirs. Jake was 9 years old when the nightmares began. It started on a Saturday afternoon when his mother took him to McDonald's. Nothing unusual, just a quick stop for a happy meal after errands. Jake was small for his age, shy, and happiest when he could sit in the booth by the window and line up his toy cars while he ate nuggets. But that day felt different. From the moment they walked in, Jake noticed a man sitting alone in the corner. He was tall, too tall, his legs stretched awkwardly under the table, his shoulders hunched so he wouldn't scrape the ceiling lamps. He wore a long, dark coat that looked out of place in the summer heat. Jake climbed onto the booth seat opposite his mother and unwrapped his burger. He tried to focus on the food, but he could feel the man's eyes, not scanning the room, not idly watching, staring directly at him. Every time Jake looked up, the man was still watching. He didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't move. Just stared, pale face blank, long fingers drumming silently against the tabletop. Jake tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mom, that man's looking at me." She turned casually, gave the stranger a quick glance, then whispered, "Don't be silly. Eat your food." Jake obeyed, but his appetite was gone. Even as they left, he looked back through the glass door. The man had stood now, impossibly tall, his coat trailing against the floor. He didn't smile, didn't wave. He only tilted his head slightly, like a puppet waiting for its strings to be pulled. That night, Jake had the first dream. He was back inside the McDonald's, but it wasn't the same. The lights were dim, flickering. The chairs were overturned, ketchup smeared across the tiles like blood. The Happy Meal boxes were scattered and torn, their bright cartoons twisted into frowns. And at the far end of the restaurant, the tall man stood. His coat stretched down to the floor, but his face was gone. Not hidden gone. Smooth, blank skin where features should have been. Jake tried to scream for his mother, but no sound came. The man's long arms reached out, stretching impossibly, fingers grazing the walls as he glided forward. Each step echoed like a hammer on steel. "Come play," a voice whispered. But it wasn't the man's voice. It came from everywhere at once, from the fryer, the soda fountain, the buzzing light above his head. Jake bolted awake, drenched in sweat. The dreams didn't stop. Every night, he was back in that empty McDonald's. Sometimes the man stood in the doorway, blocking the exit. Sometimes he sat in Jake's booth waiting. Other nights, Jake found himself trapped in the place tunnels, the air thick with plastic and static, the faceless man crawling after him with inhuman speed. At school, Jake couldn't focus. He drew the same image over and over on his worksheets. A tall figure in a coat, blank face, arms stretching across the page. His teacher scolded him for doodling, but he couldn't stop. Even awake, strange things began to happen. The fire alarm at his school went off for no reason 3 times in 1 week. At home, Jake's room grew freezing cold at night, so cold he could see his breath even with the heater running. Doors creaked open on their own. Footsteps echoed in the hallway when everyone was in bed. And always, just as he was about to drift to sleep, Jake swore he heard the whisper, "Come play." One night, his mother woke to find Jake screaming. When she ran into his room, she saw deep red scratches across his arms, as if he'd clawed himself in terror. He cried that the man had been pulling him into the tunnels again, that he couldn't get out. Desperate, she called a doctor. The doctor blamed stress, too much screen time, nightmares common for children Jake's age. He prescribed melatonin and said it would pass. But it didn't. Months later, Jake overheard 2 of his older cousins talking at a family barbecue. They were laughing about a rumor. How kids at school were talking about Slender Man, a faceless figure who haunted dreams and stalked children. Jake froze. That was his man. The blank face, the coat, the stretching arms, it was the same. Except he hadn't heard about Slender Man before. He hadn't seen the memes or the internet stories. The figure had come to him first in that McDonald's booth, where he told his mother. She scolded him for listening to nonsense. But Jake knew it wasn't coincidence. Years passed, but the memory never faded. The McDonald's closed down when Jake was 12. Officially, it was due to poor management and financial loss. But whispers said something else. Customers had complained of strange noises, food spoiling too quickly, even a child going missing from the place one evening. The boy was never found. Jake read about it online years later, now a teenager himself. His stomach turned cold when he saw the date. The disappearance happened the same week his nightmares had been at their worst. Even now, as an adult, Jake avoids fast food restaurants. He won't sit in corner booths, won't step into play areas, won't eat beneath buzzing fluorescent lights. Because sometimes when he's driving at night and passes the boarded up remains of that McDonald's, he sees him again. A tall man in a coat, standing by the door, tilting his head. And if Jake glances in the rearview mirror too long, he swears the passenger seat isn't empty anymore. Jake was 9 years old when the nightmares began. It started on a Saturday afternoon when his mother took him to McDonald's. Nothing unusual, just a quick stop for a happy meal after errands. Jake was small for his age, shy, and happiest when he could sit in the booth by the window and line up his toy cars while he ate nuggets. But that day felt different. From the moment they walked in, Jake noticed a man sitting alone in the corner. He was tall, too tall. His legs stretched awkwardly under the table, his shoulders hunched so he wouldn't scrape the ceiling lamps. He wore a long, dark coat that looked out of place in the summer heat. Jake climbed onto the booth seat opposite his mother and unwrapped his burger. He tried to focus on the food, but he could feel the man's eyes, not scanning the room, not idly watching, staring directly at him. Every time Jake looked up, the man was still watching. He didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't move. Just stared, pale face blank, long fingers drumming silently against the tabletop. Jake tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mom, that man's looking at me." She turned casually, gave the stranger a quick glance, then whispered, "Don't be silly. Eat your food." Jake obeyed, but his appetite was gone. Even as they left, he looked back through the glass door. The man had stood now, impossibly tall, his coat trailing against the floor. He didn't smile, didn't wave. He only tilted his head slightly, like a puppet waiting for its strings to be pulled. That night, Jake had the first dream. He was back inside the McDonald's, but it wasn't the same. The lights were dim, flickering. The chairs were overturned, ketchup smeared across the tiles like blood. The Happy Meal boxes were scattered and torn, their bright cartoons twisted into frowns. And at the far end of the restaurant, the tall man stood. His coat stretched down to the floor, but his face was gone. Not hidden gone. Smooth, blank skin where features should have been. Jake tried to scream for his mother, but no sound came. The man's long arms reached out, stretching impossibly, fingers grazing the walls as he glided forward. Each step echoed like a hammer on steel. "Come play," a voice whispered. But it wasn't the man's voice. It came from everywhere at once, from the fryer, the soda fountain, the buzzing light above his head. Jake bolted awake, drenched in sweat. The dreams didn't stop. Every night, he was back in that empty McDonald's. Sometimes the man stood in the doorway, blocking the exit. Sometimes he sat in Jake's booth waiting. Other nights, Jake found himself trapped in the place tunnels, the air thick with plastic and static, the faceless man crawling after him with inhuman speed. At school, Jake couldn't focus. He drew the same image over and over on his worksheets. A tall figure in a coat, blank face, arms stretching across the page. His teacher scolded him for doodling, but he couldn't stop. Even awake, strange things began to happen. The fire alarm at his school went off for no reason 3 times in 1 week. At home, Jake's room grew freezing cold at night, so cold he could see his breath even with the heater running. Doors creaked open on their own. Footsteps echoed in the hallway when everyone was in bed. And always, just as he was about to drift to sleep, Jake swore he heard the whisper, "Come play." One night, his mother woke to find Jake screaming. When she ran into his room, she saw deep red scratches across his arms, as if he'd clawed himself in terror. He cried that the man had been pulling him into the tunnels again, that he couldn't get out. Desperate, she called a doctor. The doctor blamed stress, too much screen time, nightmares common for children Jake's age. He prescribed melatonin and said it would pass. But it didn't. Months later, Jake overheard 2 of his older cousins talking at a family barbecue. They were laughing about a rumor. How kids at school were talking about Slender Man, a faceless figure who haunted dreams and stalked children. Jake froze. That was his man. The blank face, the coat, the stretching arms, it was the same. Except he hadn't heard about Slender Man before. He hadn't seen the memes or the internet stories. The figure had come to him first in that McDonald's booth. When he told his mother, she scolded him for listening to nonsense. But Jake knew it wasn't coincidence. Years passed, but the memory never faded. The McDonald's closed down when Jake was 12. Officially, it was due to poor management and financial loss. But whispers said something else. Customers had complained of strange noises, food spoiling too quickly, even a child going missing from the place one evening. The boy was never found. Jake read about it online years later, now a teenager himself. His stomach turned cold when he saw the date. The disappearance happened the same week his nightmares had been at their worst. Even now, as an adult, Jake avoids fast food restaurants. He won't sit in corner booths, won't step into play areas, won't eat beneath buzzing fluorescent lights. Because sometimes when he's driving at night and passes the boarded up remains of that McDonald's, he sees him again. A tall man in a coat, standing by the door, tilting his head. And if Jake glances in the rearview mirror too long, he swears the passenger seat isn't empty anymore. Ivy was only 4 years old when she met him. Her parents took her to McDonald's almost every Sunday after church. It was a small reward for sitting still in the pew, for wearing the itchy tights her mom insisted on. Ivy didn't care about the food as much as she cared about the play place. To a child, the tunnels seemed endless, a plastic kingdom where voices echoed and slides spilled you out into a pool of color balls that smelled faintly of fries and bleach. That afternoon, the play place was nearly empty. A couple of toddlers tumbled near the ball pit, their parents watching from the benches. Ivy climbed into the tunnels alone, her small hands slapping the smooth plastic as she crawled upward. The air smelled of sweat and disinfectant, the way it always did. She stopped at a window bubble, pressing her palms against the warm plastic. From there, she could see the whole restaurant, her parents sipping coffee, a group of teenagers near the soda fountain, and the golden arches glowing through the glass outside. Then she heard it, a whisper, peekaboo. She froze. It wasn't playful, not the way her dad said it when he covered his face with his hands. This was softer, stretched out, like someone savoring the word. Ivy turned her head toward the tunnel behind her. Empty. The sound had come from deeper inside, where the tubes twisted into shadow. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice small. Silence. She crawled forward, her knees squeaking against the plastic. Another whisper came, closer this time. "I see you." Ivy stopped. A figure crouched at the far end of the tunnel. At first she thought it was another child, but her stomach twisted. It wasn't. The thing was pale, skin almost gray, stretched tight over bones. Its eyes were too big for its face, wet and shining in the dim light. Its hair hung in greasy strands, clinging to its cheeks. It smiled at her, lips cracked, teeth jagged. "Peekaboo." Ivy screamed and scrambled backward, tumbling down the slide. She landed in the ball pit with a thud, balls scattering everywhere. Her mother rushed over. "What happened? There's a man in there." Ivy sobbed, pointing at the tunnel. Her mother glanced up. "Honey, there's no one. It's just kids." But Ivy knew what she'd seen. That night, the nightmares began. She woke screaming about the man in the tunnels, the pale thing with huge eyes. Her parents told her it was imagination, just a bad dream. But Ivy knew the difference between a dream and something real. Scratches appeared on her arms, thin red lines, as if fingernails had dragged across her skin while she slept. Her toys moved at night, lined up in neat rows when she hadn't touched them. Sometimes she woke to the sound of laughter, low and raspy, whispering from the closet. "Peekaboo." Weeks passed, and Ivy refused to go back into the play place. But one Sunday, her parents insisted. "It's safe," her dad said. "You probably saw another kid playing." They pushed her gently toward the tunnels. Ivy hesitated, heart hammering. Inside, it was quiet, too quiet. She crawled a few feet in, trying to be brave. The smell of old socks and plastic surrounded her. At the turn of the tunnel, she stopped. He was there, the same pale figure, crouched and waiting. His oversized eyes blinked slowly, never leaving hers. His grin stretched wider than before, sharp teeth glinting in the faint light. "Peekaboo," he hissed. Ivy bolted out of the tunnel, sobbing, her small legs tangling on the mats. This time her father climbed in himself, determined to prove her wrong. He searched the tunnels, crawled through every corner. He found nothing. But that night, her father admitted something quietly to her mother. When he was inside, he'd felt it too. The cold, the sense of being watched. The thing didn't stay in McDonald's. It followed Ivy home. She woke to the sound of scratching under her bed. Some nights, she saw the pale hand curl around the bed frame. Once, when she opened her eyes in the dark, the figure was crouched in the corner of her room, head tilted, eyes gleaming. It whispered softly, "Peekaboo, I found you." Her parents thought she was losing her mind. They prayed over her, bought night lights, even sprinkled holy water in her room. Nothing stopped it. The house grew heavy with unease. Doors creaked open on their own. The hallway light flickered. Her mother found deep scratches on the walls, too high for a child to make. Ivy stopped sleeping through the night. She clutched her blanket until her knuckles hurt, waiting for the whisper. And every time, it came. Finally, her parents had enough. They moved, packed boxes, sold the house, left town. The first night in the new home was quiet. Ivy slept deeply, dreamless for the first time in months. Her parents smiled in relief, thinking it was over. But Ivy knew better, because when she closed her eyes, she heard it faintly in the dark corner of the room. Peekaboo. Years later, Ivy grew up, but the fear never left. She avoided fast food play places. She couldn't look at plastic tunnels without feeling her chest tighten. The memory of those oversized eyes haunted her into adulthood. Friends teased her when she refused to let her own kids near McDonald's. "It's just a playground," they laughed. Nothing to be afraid of. But Ivy never forgot. And sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet and the children are asleep, she swears she still hears it. Soft, raspy, and far too close. "Peekaboo, I see you." I was 16 when it happened, and I've never forgotten it. It was late, past 10 p.m., when I stopped at McDonald's with a couple of friends. We'd spent the evening hanging out at the mall, and I grabbed a Big Mac to take home. By the time we split up, I still had half of it left in the bag. Walking toward the bus stop, I noticed a man sitting by the curb near the McDonald's entrance. His clothes were filthy, his hair matted, and his eyes hollow with hunger. He looked at me, then at the bag in my hand. "Can you spare that, miss?" he asked, voice cracked. "Please, just something to eat. I don't know what made me so cold that night. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was trying too hard to act tough." But instead of giving it to him, I clutched the bag tighter and said sharply, "Get a job. Buy your own." His expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed. Security came out a minute later and told him to leave the property. He stumbled as he got up, muttering something under his breath. On his way out, he glanced at me one last time. It wasn't just a look of hunger. It was a promise. I didn't think much about it until I got off the bus later that night. My neighborhood was quiet, the kind of place where porch lights flickered and stray dogs barked in the distance. I cut down the narrow sidewalk between two rows of houses to shave a few minutes off my walk home. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. At first, I thought it was another neighbor, but when I glanced back, my stomach dropped. It was him, the homeless man. He was walking faster than I was, his limp uneven, his shadow stretching across the pavement. His eyes caught the glow of a streetlight, and for the first time, I realized how tall he really was. My heart raced. I picked up my pace. So did he. Within seconds, he was close enough that I could hear his breathing, shallow, ragged, angry. I spun around. "Stop following me," I yelled, voice trembling more than I wanted. He didn't stop. In his hand, he held a rock, jagged and heavy. "You think you're better than me?" he rasped. "You think I'm nothing?" I froze. My legs wouldn't move. He lunged forward, grabbing the front of my jacket with a strength I didn't expect. The rock hovered inches from my face. "You had food," he spat, shaking me violently. My head slammed back against the siding of a house. Stars burst in my vision. "You laughed at me." "I'm sorry," I cried. The bag had fallen to the ground, my half-eaten burger spilling onto the pavement. His eyes darted down to it, then back to me. For a moment, I thought he would kill me right there. His hand tightened on my collar, his breath hot against my cheek. Then something shifted. His gaze softened, just for a second, as he looked at the burger. Slowly, he dropped me. I slid down the wall, gasping. My knees scraped the pavement. He picked up the sandwich, still clutching the rock in his other hand. "You don't know what it's like," he whispered, his voice breaking. "To be invisible, to be starving, to beg and be laughed at." He staggered back into the shadows, clutching the food like it was gold. The rock clattered to the ground. And just like that, he was gone. I stumbled the rest of the way home, shaking so badly I could barely get my key in the door. My parents thought I'd just been mugged, and in a way I had. But the police never found him. They said men like him drifted, never in one place long enough to track. For weeks, I had nightmares. I'd wake to the sound of footsteps outside my window, or I'd see his eyes in the shadows of my room. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt that rock hovering near my face again. Years later, I still think about that night. Not just the fear, but the guilt. Because the truth is, he wasn't a monster. He was desperate, and I made him feel smaller than he already was. I learned something the hard way, that cruelty can echo back, sharp and fast, and sometimes the smallest act of kindness could mean the difference between safety and violence. Whenever I pass a homeless person now, I don't look away. I don't clutch my bag tighter. I remember the man outside McDonald's, the one I refused, the one who nearly broke me in half with anger and hunger. I remember his eyes when he said, "You don't know what it's like." And he was right. When I was 11, my Uncle Mason took me out for dinner at McDonald's. It was our little tradition whenever he visited. He'd pick me up after school, tell me to order big, and then listen while I told him every ridiculous story from my week. He wasn't like my parents. He didn't scold. He didn't rush. He just laughed at my dumb jokes and let me get extra fries. That night was no different, or at least it wasn't at first. The restaurant was half empty, buzzing with the usual clatter of trays and chatter. Families wrangled toddlers in the play place. A pair of teenagers scrolled through their phones, and the smell of fries drifted through the air, heavy and comforting. Uncle Mason ordered me a happy meal. I sat in our booth tearing open the box, eager for the toy. It was something plastic and forgettable, a little car. I remember being disappointed, but Mason teased me. "Hey, don't knock it. Bet that'll be worth 50 cents on eBay someday." We were laughing when the man approached. He seemed to appear out of nowhere, drifting toward our table with a slow, deliberate calm. He wasn't old, maybe mid-30s, but something about him was wrong. His eyes were wide, too bright, like glass marbles reflecting the fluorescent lights. His smile stretched too long, teeth uneven and yellowed. In his hands, he held something. "Hey kid," he said, voice strangely cheerful. "Want to see a toy?" I froze. Mason frowned immediately. "He's got one," he said firmly, nodding at my happy meal. But the man ignored him. He leaned closer, holding out the object in his hands. It wasn't a toy, at least not any kind I'd ever seen. It looked like a jellyfish, but not a normal one. The body was translucent, slimy, pulsing faintly as if it were alive. Dangling from it were tendrils, rubbery, but disturbingly human-like. Some ended in what looked like tiny fingers twitching softly. The worst part was the face. Yes, a face. Embedded in the dome was a faint imprint of a human mouth and eyes, distorted, as though someone had pressed their face into gelatin. "Go on," the man whispered. "Touch it." I recoiled instantly. My stomach turned, and I pressed back into the booth. Mason slammed his hand on the table. "Hey, back off, pal. That's enough." The man didn't move. His grin widened. His eyes flicked to me again. "Don't you want to play? It's special. Only kids can really feel it." I shook my head violently. "No." Mason stood up then, shoulders squared. He wasn't a fighter, but he was protective. "You need to leave," he said. "Now." The man chuckled softly, almost like a lullaby. Then, slowly, he licked the surface of the jellyfish thing, his tongue sliding across the grotesque face inside. My stomach lurched as he whispered, "It likes you." Other customers had started to notice. A mother with a toddler hurried her child away from the play place. An employee glanced nervously from behind the counter, but no one stepped in. The man stepped back finally, clutching the jellyfish to his chest. "See you later, kid," he said in a sing-song voice, as if it were a promise. Then he drifted out the glass doors, leaving greasy smudges where his fingers brushed the handle. Mason sat back down, tense, his face pale. He told me not to worry, that the man was just crazy, but his eyes betrayed him. He was shaken. I barely touched my food after that. We thought it was over, but it wasn't. When we walked out into the parking lot later that night, the air was damp, fog curling around the streetlights. Mason unlocked the car and told me to get in quick. I climbed into the passenger seat, shoving my Happy Meal box onto the floor. That's when I saw him. The man was standing by the edge of the lot, half hidden in the fog. He wasn't holding the jellyfish anymore. It dangled from his hand, limp, its tendrils brushing the asphalt. His grin hadn't faded. He raised the object slowly to his mouth and, eyes locked on me, he began licking it again. Long, deliberate strokes, like it was candy. His tongue slid across the face pressed inside, and his eyes never left mine. I screamed. Mason slammed the car door shut and locked it. "Don't look at him," he barked, starting the engine. But I couldn't tear my eyes away. The man's head tilted, his body jerking slightly, as if in excitement. He pressed the jellyfish against his cheek, stroking it, then waved one finger at me. Peek! The car roared to life, and Mason peeled out of the lot. In the rearview mirror, I watched the man grow smaller, still standing there, still holding the thing, still grinning like he'd just discovered his favorite toy. And I knew I wasn't rid of him. That night, I dreamed of the jellyfish. I was back in a McDonald's, but the lights were dim, the tables overturned. The toy from my Happy Meal car box was gone. Instead, on the tray in front of me, the jellyfish thing pulsed faintly, its tendrils twitching. The face inside its dome shifted slowly, stretching, pressing against the translucent surface. It was my face. I woke screaming. I never saw the man again in person. Not at McDonald's, not anywhere. But the nightmares kept coming. Sometimes it was me inside the jellyfish, staring out with glassy eyes. Sometimes it was the man crouched beside my bed, whispering, "It likes you." Once, I woke with my skin sticky, as if something damp had been pressed against me while I slept. For years, I couldn't walk into a fast food restaurant without my chest tightening. I avoided the play place, avoided Happy Meals, avoided anything with toys. The smell of McDonald's fries still makes my stomach twist, not with hunger, but with fear. As I got older, I wondered if it had just been some bizarre prank. Maybe the toy was a disgusting art project, something he'd made to scare people. Maybe he was just a predator looking for kids to target. But there's something that doesn't make sense. A few years ago, I tried to describe the jellyfish thing to a friend. Out of curiosity, I even searched online, and I found a forum thread, dozens of people describing the same thing. A translucent jellyfish-like creature. Human features pressed inside, always accompanied by a strange man who tried to get children to touch it. Different towns, different years, always near fast food restaurants. Some kids claimed they touched it. They said it was warm, pulsing like skin. They said it whispered to them. A few of those kids, they went missing. I don't know what I saw that night. I don't know what the jellyfish really was, or why that man carried it like a prize. But I do know one thing. When Uncle Mason drove us away, when I saw that man waving at me in the fog, I wasn't just scared. I felt chosen, marked. And sometimes, even now as an adult, when the night is quiet and I close my eyes, I hear it, wet, sticky, faint against my ear. A whisper. It likes you. When I was 23, I worked the grill at McDonald's. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it paid the rent. The uniform wasn't just the shirt and visor. Sometimes management made us dress up as Danny the Griller, a cheap mascot they use for kid events. It was a knockoff of Ronald, really, a big foam head, a permanent grin, an apron splashed with cartoon burgers and fries. I hated it. The costume smelled like grease no matter how many times it was cleaned. But I'd put it on, wave at kids, and flip burgers in character because it meant an extra $20 bonus for the shift. That's how I met her, the woman who changed everything. It was a slow Tuesday evening. I was on break. The Danny costume half collapsed in a chair beside me when she walked in. She looked tired. Her hair was stringy, her clothes faded, but her eyes were intense, sharp in a way that made me sit up straighter. She walked right past the counter and stood in front of me. "You're Danny the Griller," she said. I laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, unfortunately." Her voice lowered. "My son loved Danny. He passed away last year. Would you come with me? Just for a little while. He'd want to see you." The words hit me sideways. I'd dealt with odd customers before, but nothing like this. "Ma'am," I stammered, "I can't just." "I'll pay you," she interrupted, pulling out crumpled bills. "Please, just a few minutes." I should have said no. Every part of me wanted to, but something about her desperation made me hesitate. Against my better judgment, I agreed. She led me in her beat-up sedan, insisting I keep the costume on. We drove 15 minutes out of town, past the gas stations and motels, until we reached the old cemetery on the edge of the woods. The gates were rusted, the sign crooked. The place smelled of damp earth and rotting leaves. My stomach twisted. She parked, turned to me, and whispered, "He's waiting." I stepped out, foam head under my arm, feeling foolish. The woman walked quickly down a row of cracked stones, stopping at a small headstone half buried in weeds. "Danny," she said softly, "this is my boy's favorite. This is Danny the Griller." She looked at me expectantly. My mouth went dry. Against every instinct, I put the foam head back on, raised my gloved hands, and gave a little wave. "Hi there, champ," I said in my best cheery mascot voice. "It's me, Danny." Silence. Then laughter. A child's laugh. High-pitched, bubbling, echoing faintly through the cemetery. I froze. The woman's face lit up, eyes glistening with tears. "You hear him," she whispered. "He knows you're here." My blood ran cold. There was no one else in that cemetery. No kids, no families. Just us. The air grew heavy. I felt it, like someone small had slipped a hand into mine through the costume glove. I jerked, looking down. Nothing was there, but the laughter came again, closer this time. The woman clutched her chest, smiling wildly. "Do it again," she urged. "Dance for him." I wanted to rip the costume off and run, but my body moved stiffly, jerking side to side in a fake dance. My voice cracked through the foam head. "Danny loves to grill for you, buddy." The laughter swelled, only now it wasn't joyful. It was warped, distorted, like two voices overlapping, one high and childish, the other low and guttural. I stumbled back. "We should go," I whispered, pulling the foam head off. "This doesn't feel right." But the woman's smile faltered. Her eyes darkened. "Don't stop. He's still hungry." The temperature dropped. My breath misted in the air. Behind the headstone, the ground seemed to stir, the weeds shifting as though something pressed upward from below. The laughter broke into a shriek. My ears rang. The foam head slipped from my grip and rolled across the dirt. I turned to run. The woman grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Stay," she hissed. "He needs you." I shoved her away and sprinted back toward the car. The cemetery seemed to stretch, rows of stones multiplying in the dark. The shrieking followed me, growing louder, almost inside my skull. When I reached the gates, I glanced back once. The woman was still at the grave, cradling the foamed Danny head like a baby. Behind her, a small shadow crouched by the headstone. Too small to be a man, too twisted to be a boy. Its eyes glowed faintly, and its mouth stretched impossibly wide as it laughed. I didn't stop running until I was back at McDonald's, sweating through the costume. I quit the mascot shifts after that. I told my manager I was done with Danny the Griller forever. He didn't argue, but that wasn't the end. Weeks later, a co-worker showed me something. "Hey Jack," he said, "you're in the paper." He slid the folded page across the counter. It was from the local obituary section. A photo, grainy, black and white, showed a cemetery scene. And there I was, standing in full costume, foam head and all by a small grave. The caption read, "Local mother continues tradition at her late son's resting place." But here's the thing. I don't remember anyone taking a photo that night. And in the picture, I wasn't running. I wasn't terrified. I was standing still, head bowed, one gloved hand resting on the child's stone. Worse, beside me, in the photo, was a faint shadow. Small, grinning. The co-worker laughed. "Creepy, huh?" I forced a smile, but inside my stomach dropped, because I hadn't been holding anything in that photo. Yet the shadowy figure in the frame was clutching the foam Danny head. After that, I started noticing things. Closing shifts felt wrong. Sometimes, while scrubbing the grill, I'd hear soft giggling in the freezer. Once, when I opened a walk-in cooler, the foam head was sitting on the shelf, staring at me, even though I hadn't touched the costume in weeks. At night, I'd dream of the cemetery. I'd see the woman's pale face, hear the shrill, overlapping laughter. And always, at the edge of the dream, the small figure would wave at me with one gloved hand. I don't work at McDonald's anymore, but I can't escape Danny the Griller. The foam head was supposed to stay in the restaurant storage closet, yet sometimes I swear I hear it at home. The faint squeak of its rubber grin, the muffled scrape as if it's dragging across the floor. And every so often, in the corner of my eye, I see him. A small boy-shaped shadow, crouched low, mouth stretched wide, laughing. When a new McDonald's opened in our town, it was all anyone could talk about. The old one had been torn down months before, and this shiny replacement promised a bigger menu, brighter lights, and, most exciting of all, a brand new play place. Families packed the restaurant that first weekend. Kids swarmed the slides and tunnels, their laughter echoing through the glass enclosure. It smelled like fresh plastic and French fries, the kind of combination only children could love. My sister, her husband, and their 6-year-old daughter, Riley, went on opening day. At first, it was exactly what you'd expect. Riley raced up into the tunnels, waving at her parents through the bubble windows, disappearing into the maze of colors. But then things started to go wrong. Riley came running back down after only a few minutes, pale and shaking. "There's people up there," she whispered, tugging on her mom's sleeve. "They're not kids. They're on." Her mom tried to laugh it off. "Of course there are people, honey. Lots of kids are playing." "No," Riley said, her voice trembling. "They're big. Too big. They don't talk right." Her father exchanged a look with her mom, then bent down to Riley's level. "What do you mean, kiddo?" Riley's eyes darted toward the tunnel entrance. "They keep saying my name." They let her sit with them for a while, thinking she was just overwhelmed. But eventually, Riley wanted to try again. Kids don't stay scared for long, not when there's adventure waiting. She climbed back in, slower this time. The minutes ticked by. At first they could hear her laughter, faint but clear. Then it stopped. 5 minutes passed. 10. Other children came and went, but Riley didn't appear at the bottom of the slide, or at the windows. Her parents started to panic. They asked other kids if they'd seen her. Most just shook their heads. One little boy, though, looked unsettled. "She was up there," he whispered, "with the tall ones." Her father climbed into the place himself. He crawled through the tunnels, calling her name. The plastic echoed his voice back at him, warped and hollow. He said later it felt like being in a throat, like the tunnels weren't built for play, but for swallowing. He didn't find her. When he finally emerged, sweating and frantic, the manager called for the staff to help. They shut down the place, ushered the other families out, and searched every inch. They found Riley curled in the farthest corner of the highest tunnel. She was sitting cross-legged, her hands covering her ears, eyes wide and unblinking. When her mom pulled her out, she didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just clung to her like her life depended on it. That night, Riley finally told them what had happened. She said she had crawled into one of the darker tubes when she heard whispers. Not playful whispers, but deep, scratchy voices calling her name. Riley. When she turned, she saw shapes moving toward her. Not children, not adults either. Something in between. Their arms were too long, their heads too close to the ceiling. Their skin was pale and stretched thin, and their mouths, too wide, filled with teeth that clicked together when they spoke. They told her to keep playing, to never leave, to crawl deeper into the tunnels where the lights didn't reach. She said they touched her arm, their hands cold and rubbery, leaving red marks that her parents swore they saw hours later. And when she tried to scream, the sound didn't come out. The tunnels swallowed it. Her parents didn't believe all of it, not at first. They thought maybe she'd seen shadows, maybe older kids messing around. They tried to reassure her, but Riley refused to go near the place again. Weeks passed, then other children started saying similar things. One boy claimed the tunnels whispered his name when nobody else was inside. Another girl refused to climb back in after she saw faces in the walls. Parents dismissed it as imagination, but staff began whispering among themselves. At night, when the restaurant closed, workers swore they heard scuttling inside the place. Once, during cleaning, the manager found small handprints smeared across the inside of the bubble windows. Prints too large for any child. Riley changed after that. She woke up screaming most nights, crying about the tall ones waiting in the corners of her room. Sometimes her parents would find her sitting on the floor, rocking back and forth, whispering. They said, "I can't leave." They said I belong to them. Doctors called it trauma. They said she'd seen something that triggered her imagination. But no medicine, no therapy erased the fear in her eyes. Her parents eventually stopped taking her to McDonald's at all. Years later, long after Riley grew up, the place was shut down permanently. Officially, the reason was structural issues and sanitation concerns. But people in town whispered the real reason. Too many kids went missing for a few minutes at a time. Too many came back crying, refusing to speak about what they'd seen. And more than once, staff swore they saw shadows moving inside the tunnels when the place was empty. I visited that McDonald's myself once, after it had closed for renovations. The place was blocked off, the tunnels dark and silent. But as I stood there, I could have sworn I heard something faint, like plastic creaking under unseen weight, and a low whisper curling through the air. "Come play." Working the night shift at McDonald's was supposed to be easy money. At least, that's what everyone said. No kids, no rush hour lines, just a trickle of late-night drivers looking for fries before collapsing into bed. I was 19, new to the job, and eager for extra hours. But the first week I worked the midnight close, I realized something was wrong with that building. It wasn't the quiet, it was too quiet. A silence that pressed in on you when the machines powered down, like the walls were holding their breath. And it wasn't the dark outside the windows. It was the feeling that someone was staring back through the glass, even when the parking lot was empty. The first incident. One Tuesday, near 2 a.m., my coworker Luis was mopping the lobby while I cleaned the fryer. We were joking about music when he suddenly froze, mop mid-swipe. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I turned down the radio. At first, nothing. Then, faint footsteps clicking steadily across the lobby tiles. But we were the only ones there. Luis swung the mop toward the noise. The sound stopped. The lobby was empty. The doors locked. The chairs flipped onto tables. We laughed nervously, chalking it up to echoes. But when we turned back to our work, the mop water had rippled in its bucket, as though something had just walked past. The drive-through voice. A week later, I was on drive-through duty. Past midnight, customers were rare. I leaned on the counter, headset crackling with static. Then, clear as day, a voice came through. "I'm at the window." I jumped. The screen showed no car, no order. The lot outside was empty. "Hello?" I asked. Static. Then again, "I'm at the window." Luis came over, frowning. "No one's there, man." The voice spoke once more, lower this time. "Let me in." The headset went dead. We didn't speak for the rest of the shift. Shadows in the kitchen. By the third month, the whole crew admitted it. This McDonald's was haunted. Dishes shifted on their own. The soda machine hissed without anyone pressing it. One night, the walk-in freezer door slammed shut, trapping Jenna inside until Luis yanked it open. She swore she felt icy hands holding it from the other side. The worst was the shadows. They weren't normal dark shapes. These moved with intention, sliding along the walls like liquid smoke. Sometimes you'd catch one standing at the edge of your vision, too tall and too still to be human. Once while scrubbing the grill, I looked up and saw one lean out of the manager's office, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It didn't vanish when I blinked. It simply melted back into the wall. The night the entities spoke. The real horror came one Friday night. We were closing with a skeleton crew. Just me, Luis, and Jenna. The dining room was spotless, the machines humming their final cycles. That's when every light in the restaurant flickered at once. The soda machine hissed violently, spraying syrup onto the floor. The fryer roared as if someone had cranked the heat, oil bubbling like lava. And from the place, dark, empty, locked, we heard laughter. Children's laughter, high-pitched and echoing. Luis dropped his mop. "Nope, no way." But Jenna was pale, rooted to the spot. "Listen." The laughter grew louder. Then it changed. It stretched, slowed, warping into deep, guttural tones, like adults imitating children badly. I grabbed my phone, fumbling to call the manager. Before I could dial, the lights went out completely. In the pitch black, we heard voices. "Hungry. Still working. This is our shift." The words hissed from every corner, overlapping, male and female, young and old. The air grew heavy, pressing on our chests. I could barely breathe. Luis whispered, "They're in the building." The figure by the counter. When the emergency lights flicked on, we weren't alone. At the counter stood a figure. Not a customer, not a coworker. Its body was long and thin, its uniform an imitation of ours, distorted, grease-stained, sleeves hanging too far past the wrists. Its face was the worst part. Blank, featureless skin where eyes and mouth should have been, except for a faint, permanent smile stretched too wide. Behind it, in the shadows, more shapes moved. Some crawled on all fours, limbs bending backwards. Others hunched like broken mannequins, heads twitching. They shuffled closer, their feet clicking against the tiles. Jenna screamed. Luis grabbed the fire extinguisher like it was a weapon. I just stood there frozen. The lead figure tilted its head. Its skin rippled as it spoke, not from a mouth, but from everywhere at once. "Keep working." The flight. The fryer exploded with steam. The soda machine sprayed wildly. The freezer door slammed open, releasing a gust of icy air that smelled of rot. That broke my paralysis. I grabbed Jenna's arm, yanked her toward the back door. Luis followed, extinguisher clutched in his hand. We ran through the kitchen, but the shadows moved faster. They crawled across the walls, reaching out with long, black fingers. One brushed my neck, cold as liquid nitrogen. We burst out the back exit into the night. The air outside never felt so clean. When we looked back, the restaurant lights flickered like a dying heartbeat. For a moment, we saw them pressed against the windows, distorted workers, children, things that wore human shapes but weren't human at all. Watching. Then the lights went out completely. Aftermath. The next morning, the manager brushed it off. Power surge. Equipment malfunctions. You three panicked. But Luis quit that week. Jenna lasted a month before transferring. I stayed the longest, 3 more months, because I needed the money. But I never worked another night shift. Daylight made the place feel safer, though sometimes I'd still catch shadows sliding just out of view. Eventually, I left too. Years later, that McDonald's is still open. Families eat under those buzzing lights. Kids laugh in the play place. Most never notice anything. But talk to the night staff, the ones who stay past midnight, alone with the hum of the machines. Some of them quit suddenly. Others refuse to speak about what they've seen. Every now and then, someone posts on local forums. Anyone else work the night shift at McDonald's? Ever hear voices saying you're not the only ones working? The replies are always the same. Yes, 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 and one warning repeated like scripture. If the entities show up, don't stop what you're doing. Keep cleaning, keep cooking, keep pretending. If you stop, they notice. And once they notice you, you don't get to leave.